All right, so I'm going to share my screen again. And some of the results, this is just a quick list of some of the results that I see in working with women. A lot more vitality, feelings of aliveness, inspiration, and passion, feeling deeply, deeply connected, not just to themselves and to their sisters, but also to the sacred feminine and to the earth. Really deepening in intuition, spiritual knowing, creativity, flow, and authenticity, bringing your real voice as a leader forward. Not a performative voice, but your true voice, like what really matters to you and what is really coming through from your essence. Another one that I see a lot is meeting goals with less effort, because we're working not at the level of effort, we're working at the level of magnetizing resources, magnetizing opportunities, using magic even to make things happen instead of like grunt effort and grind to make things happen. So anyway, so this is a list, and I put this here for you because I want you to get a sense of what is possible when you do the deeper root level of work at the soul level to shift and to balance the masculine and feminine energies in yourself. When you're not running only on masculine energy, and when you bring enough of the feminine forward, this is what's possible. A lot more aliveness, vitality, creativity, all those things possible. So take a moment now. I'm going to put the music on for about 30 more seconds. And I just want you to jot down for yourself, what's possible for you? What is there? What would it be like for you if you had a circle of peers doing this kind of work? What are the outcomes for you that you would really love in your life? Just jot that down for yourself. What matters most to you here? And also, what would serve you in terms of your leadership? Which of these things could you use more of in order to have a deeper impact that doesn't cost you, that doesn't drain you, that doesn't deplete you? Because a lot of times we think about deepening our impact or expanding our reach, and the first thing that comes up is, but I can't give anymore, I'm exhausted, So the topic here is essential feminine leadership. So what is essential about feminine leadership? I just was asking myself that question last night. What is it that's really essential? Because I don't have 3 hours. So what is really essential? What I believe is essential is, first of all, life. I don't even have that. Yeah, I have that in a second on this list, really. Wholeness. Wholeness. Are you living in or out of balance with yourself? Are you bringing all of yourself to work? Are you honoring the feminine principle in your life and work? Because the feminine principle is about the whole, caring about the well-being of the whole and not just the interests of the parts. So wholeness is essential. Life is essential. Service to life. Are you giving life force energy to life-defeating purposes? Instead of climbing higher on the ladder, you might ask your question, is your ladder propped up against the right wall? Are you working in ways that boost or drain your life force energy? And is your work, I know one woman here, Angela's work is devoted to benefiting the whole. She's here, as an executive in a nonprofit working on cleaning up the world's oceans. So is your ladder on the right wall? Does your work benefit the whole? That's what I mean by life-giving, life-nurturing, life-sustaining. Does it have love at the center? Are you connected and open in the heart? Connected and open in the womb? Connected and open to the earth as the original womb of creation? so that what you create in your life will be life-giving, life-sustaining. What is essential about feminine leadership is relationship. Everything in the universe is related to everything else. We are all related. We are all related. So it's essential that we are focused on building relationship, not just with the people in our life, but also with the critters, also with the ocean, also with the trees, relationship with the stars, the mountains. What is essential about the feminine is cycles. Life is continuously seeding, gestating, birthing, growing, and declining and dying. It's a whole cycle of life, birth, growth, death, right? This is what the patriarchy fights against, the natural cycles, and it thinks that we're just going to keep climbing up and up and up and up. We're going to keep growing. And but constant growth like that is not aligned with truth and is not aligned with life. It's a cancer. And it's killing us and all of our relations. So as a feminine leader, you have to be willing to let your creations die so you can create new ones. And you have to be willing to let your income ebb and flow with natural cycles. So what I'm talking about here is actually alignment. It's about the way that we lead must be in alignment with what we actually value. So if you are working in old paradigm ways, and we all are, trust me, we'll talk about this more, but if you're working in old paradigm ways, that's not it. We really have to work on removing the hooks, the patterns, the ways of being, and the conditioning of the patriarchy so that we can free our voice to speak real truth and free our wombs to create that which is aligned with the highest good for all beings, not just the profiteers or the shareholders, but for all beings. It really takes something to do that. So a little bit of context before I get into I want to show you the Sophia leadership model in just a minute, but first a little bit of context. I want to just assert that this is my perspective. The current paradigm that we live in is dominated by masculine values without the proper balance of feminine values. And therefore, it is not aligned with life because the feminine is life. And so the current paradigm that we live in, you can see it everywhere you look. It is life defeating. We're destroying the very mother, the very environment that gives us life. And we simply cannot go on like that. And so I'm seeing that as the fundamental imbalance between the masculine and feminine is the cause of so many of these problems, is the root cause of so many of these problems. And so since we can't go on like this, it is time for a new kind of leadership. What was unsustainable before, it's all over when you look around, what was unsustainable before is collapsing now. Institutions and old ways of being, the old ways of power and greed, of exploitation and extraction, they will not stand. Patriarchy is in its final death throes, and it's putting up a really big fight, but it is in its final death throes. And we, in the moment, it's like we're standing on the edge of the cliff, which begs the question, who do you choose to be at this time, in this great turning? Who do you choose to be? That's a question that Meg Wheatley asks, if you know her work. And we might be, Martha knows her. Who do you choose to be? You might be angry. You have a right to be angry. You might be scared, and you would have all kinds of reasons to be scared. We all are, you know. But one thing that I learned from my mother, when I was a little girl, my mother used to do a lot of service work, you know, and she was a person who lived in fear all the time. She was neurotic. She had all kinds of neuroses, and she was just anxious and fearful all the time. But she taught me that the way out of fear is in service to others. The way out of our fear is in service to others. I'm talking about servant leadership. I'm talking about being the change that we want to see in the world. And so what I mean by aligning our way of working with our purpose, what I mean by that is if you want to do life-giving work, then you have to hold yourself accountable to working in life-giving ways. Not ways that burn you out, deplete you, and, you know, create ill health. If we want to evolve beyond a patriarchal culture that values, really our United States culture values money, work, status, and power first. If we want to evolve beyond that, we have to align ourselves with love. With love. We have to lead from love. But it breaks my heart because so many of us, even though we want that and we see it, we're still working in old ways that lead us to feeling overwhelmed, overextended, under-resourced. And then when that happens, our leadership is more reactive than creative. How many of you have had that experience? When you're overwhelmed, your leadership suffers, right? Or maybe, you know, a lot of times what happens is we're feeling disconnected from other women or from the earth or even from our own soul because there's no time for that, you know. Or maybe you're neglecting self-care or just not paying attention to your spiritual life. I don't know. This is what I see. This is what I see happening to a lot of women because we're still caught up in the old patriarchal culture. And we cannot birth a new paradigm using the leadership strategies and styles of the old one that are life-defeating. So that is what, hold on, are my thoughts about what's essential. Hold on, I'm going backwards. There we go. That's my thought about what is essential about feminine leadership. If you don't hear me speak anything else today, you've heard the main points. To me, that is essential feminine leadership. And next, I'm going to show you the Sophia leadership model that I created. This is about 10 years ago, maybe a little less than 10 years ago. I'm going to show you a very high level of the model, like kind of like the back of the napkin level, you know. Where is my mouse? There we go. I don't have time to go into the whole thing, but I will share the whole thing with you in a more full-length video if you want. It'll come in your follow-up email. But before we do that, I just want to say, inevitably, when I share this model, people get excited about it and want to use it and teach it and like share it, you know, especially leadership coaches. That's happened to me many times before. And so I just want to say for just a quick moment that because I'm not giving it all to you, and because we don't have time to do the embodiment work, because we don't have time to do the soul level work, this is for your eyes only today, right? Until I feel and we agree that there's been a real embodiment of the work. And then I definitely want you to share it. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm here. And I do have a train the trainer and 9-month mystery school program for that purpose. I'm not enrolling for that today. It's closed for the rest of this year, but that is a possibility for next year if that's something that you might be interested in. And the reason for that is that in the patriarchy, in the masculine dominant values system, the mind is glorified above the body and the heart. And we grasp concepts. We think we've got it. We've like got it up until about right here in the forehead, but it's not actually fully embodied. And so in order to honor the feminine, we really have to commit to only teaching that which we are really fully embodying. Okay, so that's my request of you today. So the Sophia leadership model is based on a framework that is called polarity thinking. Any of you know polarity thinking? Yeah, Trace. Okay. Oh, Linda, you do. Awesome. I studied for many, many years, over a decade, with a beloved mentor of mine, Barry Johnson, who created a framework called polarity thinking. Oh, and Angela knows a bit about it too. And essentially, I'll give you the nutshell. Polarities are pairs of values that seem like they're opposed to each other. They are in tension with each other, and they seem like they're opposed, like you have to choose one over the other. But actually, in truth, they are interdependent, which means that they need each other over time in order for any system to be healthy. The system could be you, or it could be your marriage, or it could be your team or your organization. It could be the entire planet. Whatever system it is, we have to balance polarities and honor the interdependent nature of these poles and these values in order to have a healthy system. So what I'm talking about when I refer to masculine and feminine is not gender. What I'm referring to is values and energies that you can kind of see here on the page, right? I'm talking about values and energies. And you can see that they actually, Barry is very fond of saying values come in pairs. Values always come in pairs, actually. We don't always see that, but we kind of live in a soup, and we're always swimming in a soup of polarities. Here's another list for you. And I could make these lists all day long. I mean, there's just so much, but I think you can see by looking at these lists and what's important here. And I teach polarity thinking at big companies like Google. I don't talk about the masculine and feminine. I talk about polarities and pairs of values, but when I put the lists up, I make very sure to put them all lined up with the masculine on one side and the feminine on the other. And people already know, when you look at this list, you can see and feel the difference in the energy from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. Yes, left brain, right brain. Masculine and feminine. And you can also, in most organizations, you can feel the dominance of the masculine when you look at a list like this. So I don't have to do any persuading. People get it right away, when we talk about polarities. So when we get out of balance, I'm not going to talk right now today about what shows up in organizations or, at larger levels of system, but just in terms of your own leadership. This list came from my original research when I first started researching this topic about 10 years ago. I did a bunch of interviews and research, and this is what came through. Okay, this is what women leaders experience most of the time in organizations that are dominated by the masculine principle, and most of them are. I mean, I can't say all of them are, but most of them are. So if you see yourself anywhere here on this list, you're not alone, and it has a lot to do with the system that you're in. The culture, the organizational culture that you are swimming in every day impacts you. And as women, we've only been in the workforce for 75 years? Like, not very long. And it's a workforce that was created by men for men. And so, of course, they run it on masculine energy. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't, like, I don't want them to feel like they've done something wrong. They just created a system that worked for them, but it doesn't actually work for, if you have a woman's body and a feminine essence, then running masculine energy all day long is going to make you sick. If you do that over and over for decades, it's like running, you could get away with it for a little while, but it's really like running diesel fuel through a regular engine. You know, over time, it's going to break down. That's what happened to me. I got to the point where I burned out and couldn't work for 2 years and had to focus on my health for 2 years. That's actually how this body of work came out of me, because I went through that experience. So we've got to recreate the organizations in such a way that they are more balanced, and so that not just men are thriving in them, but also women, and also life is thriving. We've got to lead differently. But if we want to change the culture of the organization that we're working in, or in the organizations that we consult to, the first thing we have to do is make sure we're not perpetuating the masculine dominance in our own self, in our own leadership. You know, we have to embody more of a balance ourselves. Okay, so here comes the back of the napkin of the Sophia leadership model. This is super high level. I have a lot more slides I'm not going to show you today, but you can get those on the video if you want the full teaching. So there are 4 actually universal energies. So I've been talking about masculine, feminine, but if you cross those with the polarity of dynamic and static, it's another polarity, dynamic and static. And this actually comes from Carl Jung. This comes from Carl Jung's work. Dynamic masculine, dynamic feminine, static masculine, static feminine. These are distinctions that Carl Jung made. And all I did was cross it over with polarity thinking, you know. But essentially what you do, what happens with polarities, let me just go back a little bit. I want to just go back for a minute. Forgot to say this. What happens with polarities is that they're interdependent. So if you focus on one, or the whole list of the left-hand side, for example, if you focus on one side of a polarity and don't get enough of its interdependent pair, what happens is you will get life-defeating consequences. And it doesn't matter whether you choose the left side or the right side. If you just choose a side, you're going to get consequences, right? So we were talking about the consequences of imbalance. But what I want to say here is that these 4 universal energies are so interdependent with each other that if they get out of balance, there will be consequences for you, for your team, for your organization, for the whole world, right? So if you have too much dynamic masculine, for example, on the upper left here, the beauty of this energy is that it's what gets things done. This is the one that we glorify in organizations, right? We've got to get things done, got to be productive, got to get results, got to hit our goals, you know, got to implement the plan. We need this energy very much, but if it gets out of balance with the feminine, then you can get into burnout. If you don't have enough of this energy, you'll fail to launch. You won't get things off the ground, right? So you can have too much or too little of any of these 4 energies, because they're all 4 required and they need to be in balance. So that's the dynamic masculine. The static masculine is also, we're very familiar with this in organizations and leadership. This is where we get analysis, planning, structure, stability, containment. You know, we contain the flow of the feminine. It's like the river banks of the river. You know, you need the banks of the river to contain the flow. Otherwise, it's going to make a big mess and flood. Right. So you got to have that energy. This is where theories come from, and science and laws, policies, regulations, all of that comes from this energy. But if you have too much of it without the balance of the feminine, you'll get oppression, like serious oppression. This is where the Inquisition came from. Fear of the feminine, squelching of the feminine gifts and the feminine magic. And women were literally burned at the stake because the static masculine energy got out of control. So it can be very dangerous, very oppressive. In organizations, it looks more like red tape and bureaucracy, you know. And if you have too much of this, you'll definitely squash creativity and innovation. Okay. Is making sense, everybody? Starting making sense? The dynamic feminine is the one that is like full of life and passion and beauty and magic and mysticism and, you know, emotion, all the things that are moving, because dynamic is a moving energy. It's a moving energy. So it's very colorful and desirable, sexy. But also it can, if you have too much of it without enough containment, it can go all the way into like hedonism or chaos or even like addiction, you know? So this is why people often get really scared of this energy. This is why Nixon clamped down on psychedelics, for example, right? Got to get that shit under control because there was a fear. There's a fear of this energy if it goes wild. This is the wild feminine, the Kali feminine. But we need it so much. This is the only energy that brings creativity, innovation, poetry, art, like all the things that we live for, you know, sex, love, that's where it is. So we can't squash it or it will leak out sideways in unhealthy ways. The static feminine is also way undervalued in organizations and leadership, way undervalued. This is the ground of all being. This is like the earth mother energy, static feminine. This is where we plant the seeds in the womb, and allow there to be gestation time for new ideas, new projects. This is where we actually nurture the little seedlings of the new paradigm. You know, this is where this energy is like an embrace of all that is. This is the one that holds all of life in its embrace, as all of life as valuable, unconditional love. But I think the reason why we don't, and it also requires rest. You know, this is where we have the cycles of activity and rest. And this is where the rest comes in. So this energy is seriously undervalued in leadership and organizations. We don't get enough rest. We are constantly talking about producing, but we're not talking about nourishment. And producers can only do so much without nourishment and rest. Okay. So hopefully that is high enough. Let me see if there's anything else I want to see. Oh, static feminine. One of the reasons why we don't want to go to the static feminine in organizations and leadership is because we have a fear of nothing happening, paralysis, or victimhood. You know, like there's a passivity to this energy, but we also really, really need it. So when you put all of these together, this is what it looks like on a polarity map. So what I've done here is I've put the upsides or the values of each of these energies on the top, and the downside or the consequences of what you get when you over focus on one pole You get the downside. I put the downside across the bottom. So of course, right, when you look at it this way, you can see, oh my God, we actually need all 4 of these energies. We have to have all 4 of them if you want all of the things across the top. You know, solving problems, achieving goals, getting results. Yes, check. Caring for people and planet, sustainability, well-being, the care for the whole. Yes, please check. Being organized, stable, dependable, fair. Yes. Being innovative, inspired, passionate, authentic, collaborative. Yes, please. All 4. And then to the degree that you don't balance the 4, you will get those consequences across the bottom. And the longer you stay out of balance, the more of those consequences you will get. So I see some heads nodding. I'm going to just let you keep looking at that for a minute. In the 9-month mystery school program that I have, we work this model at a whole much deeper level with the aim of transforming yourself first and then bringing it to your teams, your clients, and your organizations. But one of the things that I have found, and one of the reasons why I don't bring this model yet into organizations, is because I actually have found that I need to take the women out of the soup. Like, we need to get out of the soup of the context of the culture of the, you know, the organization in order to make any headway. You know, so we're going to do our own inner work. We got to get out of the boardroom and the conference room and into the temple space. So that's what we do in the 9-month program. Is we spend time together in the temple in 3 different retreats, working really at the soul level and sacred space. So as I mentioned, that program's closed for this year. But if you are intrigued by that possibility, please reach out or get on my mailing list or something, and I'll keep you posted about it. And then if you're curious about how balanced or unbalanced you are with these 4 energies, what I want to invite you to is to take the Sophia Leadership Assessment. Take the Sophia Leadership Assessment. I'll make an offer for you to take that really affordably in the Trace, would you be willing to put that link in the chat? Thank you. You can take that assessment and have a debrief with me. I'm going to offer a debrief actually next week on Friday, a group debrief of the Sophia Leadership Assessment. So if you want to take it and come to the call with me, I'll go more into depth about all of this stuff, and we can look at actually how balanced or imbalanced are you with your leadership. And let's see what we have next. Oh, Nina Simon's, what is needed at this pivotal time is an uprising of full spectrum leadership. This is what she calls it. If you know Nina Simon's from Pioneers, and if you don't know of her work, I highly, highly recommend it. What is needed here is full spectrum leadership. That's what I'm calling integrated leadership. We're talking about the same thing. So next up is this question of, what does it really take? What does it really take to lead from wholeness and to birth a new paradigm? Because we've grown up with the patriarchy so deeply embedded in our systems, in our culture, and even in our understanding of what it means to be a leader. Even in, like, I've been teaching leadership development at Harvard, even at the highest levels, our understanding of what it means to be a leader is only just now beginning to open up to to see the value in some of these feminine values. And so there are things that we're aware of and things that we don't even, that are sort of outside of our conscious awareness. And also we don't have good examples. We don't have good examples of what it's like to lead from wholeness and balance, because really we're just still learning about what the feminine has to offer and how to embody that part of ourselves. So the good news is I see lots of signs, lots of evidence that the feminine is rising and is coming forward, especially in my field of organization and leadership development, especially in that field. Like, I'll give you some examples. I went to graduate school with professors who specialized in environmental sustainability. Yes, that's feminine. Emotional intelligence, feminine. Appreciative inquiry, feminine. Systems thinking. These are the 4 pillars of my graduate school program, all feminine, on the feminine pole. So there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of talk about vulnerability and empathy and collaboration in leadership conversations these days. And I'm really, really grateful for that. And also, I'm painfully aware of how much further we have to go. And also what it really takes, what it really takes to embody this new paradigm. So let's have a conversation about the challenges. On the next couple of slides, I just invite you to jot down which of these statements are true in your experience. Which of these statements are true in your experience? Have you ever reached a point of exhaustion and fatigue from nonstop doing? Have you ever been so self-reliant that you couldn't receive? That was a big one for me. A big one for me that I really had to work through. It took me a decade really to work on that. Receiving. Have you ever lacked trust that life will hold and nurture you? But when you don't have that kind of trust, you think this, I'm talking about myself here, like I've been through this. When we don't have that kind of trust, we tend to think that we have to make everything happen through our own will, through our own effort. Have you ever felt numb in the face of pain and suffering? I'm sure most of us have been there, actually, in the last couple of years. Maybe in the times of pandemic, we've been through the ringer the past 2 years, and not even just with the pandemic, but with the Trump years and all of the environmental crises. We've just been through it. We've been through trauma. So in times like that, it gets harder and harder to lead from our higher self. We're more reactive than creative. So we're coming out of the pandemic. We haven't healed from it yet. And so maybe you might be struggling to sustain your energy during this long crisis, or to engage the suffering of the world in any kind of productive way. A lot of times people are just tuning out, not engaging with the suffering of the world. Or maybe you're just not taking exquisite care of yourself. Or maybe you're struggling to magnetize support and resources and money for your change work. Still trying to work through effort and not actually embodying a magnet. That's what happens when you embody the feminine. Is the energy of the feminine is magnetic. It will draw resources, people, and opportunities to you. You don't have to make it happen. So, when we are under duress like we have been, when we're stressed out and overwhelmed, when we feel unsafe, we choose different routes of, I call it routes of safety, routes of safety. We'll check out, we'll get distracted, we'll be on the phone, we'll get really, really busy. That's my favorite one, getting really, really busy so I don't have to feel what's going on. Some people like to shop, some people like to drink. Some people just think that they have to work harder, drive harder. If I could just get to that goal, it will all feel better. And if we're in that kind of consciousness, these are some of the consequences. Anybody seeing yourself in here? Trace. Yes, head's nodding. Okay, so that was not enough static feminine. So if that's you, that you'll know where to look, what's the energy you need to cultivate more of, right? Here's not enough dynamic feminine. If we're running too much masculine energy and we don't have enough dynamic feminine, Have you ever lost your radiance, actually felt really dry, lost your passion, or held back your voice, didn't speak your truth, even when it was really important that you do so? Or dismissed your intuition or ignored it? Or maybe just lacked the creative juice and passion required to generate breakthrough results. Like, we actually need that. We need the juice of the dynamic feminine, the juice of life for creativity. And in this, in this great turning, in these hard times of the pandemic, have you been struggling to lead creatively because you're just trying to keep your head above water, or keep your energy and mood high enough to generate the positive change that you want to create? Or this next one is actually one of my biggest concerns. I think we're all struggling with the amount of disinformation, propaganda, lies, and static. The static that gets created by lies, propaganda, disinformation. It creates a lot of static on the airwaves. And if you are intuitive, but if you're used to going up to the airwaves for information, you might be finding, like I am finding, it's really trafficky up there. There's a lot of static, and it's harder to get clear guidance and information, which is why it's more important than ever to go down and into the body, down and into the earth. That's the feminine way of getting information, intuitive information. It's becoming more and more important to go down and in for that. So these are some examples of what can happen when we lead with too much masculine, not enough dynamic feminine. So back to this question. If we care so much about birthing the new paradigm, why are we still struggling with all these consequences? Right? That's my question. It's like, if I care so much, why is this still happening? Why is this still happening? And it's because the patriarchal programs are still running in our system. They're still driving our thoughts and actions, even if we don't know it, and even if we don't want it. Right? And most of us are still running an imbalance of masculine energies over the feminine. Most of us. I mean, I've been at this work for 10 years, and it still catches me up sometimes. I've come a long, long way, but it still catches me. So we are all challenged to rise above the old paradigm because it's so deeply ingrained in our consciousness and in our bodies. It's one thing to understand the back of the napkin concepts, or even the deeper concepts as I present them, but we keep trying to bring in this new way, even though we can see what's needed and we can understand that there's an imbalance, but actually learning to lead from the feminine and to embody the feminine ourselves can't happen in a webinar or even a weekend or even a week or maybe not even in a decade. It takes time to unwind all that conditioning and to start learning a new way. You have to actually change. So what does it really take? This is a quick little synopsis, but what I think it takes to unwind and rewire ourselves is to do this deeper level of soul work in devotion, in an actual devotion to the sacred divine, in a relationship with the sacred feminine, to do the shadow work, to do the prayer work, to do the spiritual practice, the embodiment practices, to spend time in the temple with your sisters. That is, for me, that is my favorite way, not just because it's the most fun, but also because we can go so much deeper together when we're together. I know Trace has been in the temple with me before and seen the magic of that. When we actually come together to do our deep work together in sisterhood, we go way deeper, way faster, and we can make a much bigger difference in our leadership when we have sisters at our back. And when sisters are doing their work, we can learn from just watching them, or we can, if one sister is doing really well with a particular energy, you can kind of borrow that from her. It's really amazing what can happen in sisterhood. And then mentoring is important because we have to come out of the temple space and then bring this work into real life. It's not just like going to the mountaintop and staying on the mountaintop. You got to actually bring the transformation to your life. And that takes both sisterhood and mentoring. So those are my thoughts. I could say a lot more, but those are my thoughts about what it actually takes. And after having worked on this for 10 years, is really what I believe makes a difference. Please don't think that you have to do this alone. That is actually part of the patriarchal conditioning, that you have to do your own inner work by yourself. No, we do it in sisterhood. In sisterhood.